Okay, this year for the solstice, I did the 13 wishes. So for the new year, I still had no idea what my resolution was. If you hadn't heard what the 13 wishes are for the winter solstice, it's where you write down 13 wishes for the new year. And every day thereafter, you burn one of them with the intention that that's the one that God, the universe, is going to take care of for you in the new year. And after you burn the first 12, the one that's left is your responsibility for the new year.
Now, on the west side of the state, the Ottawa County Sheriff confirms tonight that the deaths of a family of 8 are being investigated as a murder-suicide.
The husband suspected of killing his wife and 6 children, ranging in age from 5 to 15.
Firefighters got called to this house twice in one morning. The first time they checked, found nothing, and drove away. They had no idea a family of 8 was already dead inside. The second call is the one that changed everything. And by the time it came in, a mother and her 6 children, ages 5 to 15, had been shot dead in their bedrooms, and the man who did it, their own husband and father, was gone too. Before we get into this one, if you're new here, welcome to Crime Files. This case is heavy, and it deserves to be told right. So if you want more real cases covered with care, hit subscribe, tap that bell, and give this like so more people can see it. Okay, let's get into what happened in Grand Haven Township. This is a small community on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, the kind of place people move to for a quieter life, good schools, water nearby, neighbors who wave at each other. Riverside Trail, where the family lived, is a normal residential street, nothing that would make you think anything was wrong. And for a long time, from the outside, this family looked like they were doing just fine. Amanda Karolkiewicz went by Mandy. She was 39 years old, and by every account from people who knew her, she poured her whole self into her family. She worked as a substitute teacher. She'd also written a children's book called The Magical Mantra about learning to see the good in yourself, a story she worked on closely with an illustrator named Crystal Kramer, who later said she grew close to Mandy through the process of making it. Mandy was also known as an advocate for kids with special needs. Her parents, Steve and Becky Lawwill, described her afterward as a kind and devoted soul who loved her family and her students. That's not just a nice thing to say about someone after they've died. Everyone who's spoken about Mandy has said basically the same thing. She was the kind of mom whose whole world was her kids, and she had 6 of them. For boys, ages 15, 12, 11, and 5, and 2 11-year-old girls, Ella and Caroline, who she and her husband had adopted from China. Mandy was proud of that. Just 8 days before she died, she'd posted on TikTok about a trip she'd taken with her daughters back to China. She was dressed in traditional Hanfu clothing, all smiles, and she wrote about how proud she was of their heritage, calling the trip one of the coolest experiences of her life. That post is still up, and knowing what came just over a week later, it's hard to watch. Her husband was Christopher Karolkiewicz, who went by Chris. He was 47, and professionally, he had a solid career. He was a national vice president of sales and marketing for the American Heart Association, specifically for the division that handles CPR and first aid training and products. He worked remotely from their home, never actually setting foot in a local Michigan office. On paper, this was a family with 6 kids, 2 incomes, a nice house on a quiet street, and by all appearances, a full life. But there's something you need to know, something that would only come out after the tragedy. Weeks before this happened, Chris lost that job. His employment with the American Heart Association ended in July 2026, just before the killings, and the organization later said in a statement that they were devastated by the news and that their thoughts were with the loved ones of those who lost their lives. And behind the scenes of the seemingly stable family, there were cracks that had been there for years, cracks that Mandy herself had written about online, without anyone around her realizing just how much danger those cracks represented. So you have a mother who adored her kids, who'd just taken a joyful trip with her daughter's days earlier. You have a father who'd quietly lost his job. And you have 6 children who had no idea what was coming. Neighbors had no reason to worry. There were no police calls to that home before this. No history of violence on record for Chris at all. Just a family, like so many others, until one Thursday night changed everything. Now, let's go back to that morning, because the timeline here is genuinely unsettling. On Friday, July 24th, around 8:30 in the morning, firefighters got a call about the smell of smoke near Riverside Trail. close to 148th Avenue and Mercury Drive. They went out, checked the area, and couldn't find any fire, so they left. No one knew that inside that house, something catastrophic had likely already happened. Investigators later said they believe the shootings may have actually started the evening before Thursday night, hours before that first call ever came in, meaning that house had already gone silent long before anyone outside had any reason to suspect a thing. Then, around 11:40 that same morning, more calls came in about smoke. Firefighters went back out. This time, they found smoke actually coming from home. As crews worked to put out the fire, they went inside, and that's when they discovered the bodies, all 8 of them, spread across various bedrooms throughout the house. Investigators say the fire had been set intentionally in multiple locations, on the first floor and down in the basement, with the basement taking the worst of the damage. And critically, the fire came after the killings, not before. Whoever said it wasn't trying to harm anyone else in that moment. Everyone was already gone. It was something else entirely, maybe an attempt to destroy evidence, maybe something more symbolic. We genuinely don't know, and investigators have been careful not to guess publicly, even now. What we do know is that the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office, once they got into the scene, treated this immediately as a suspicious death investigation. Multiple gunshot wounds, multiple victims, a fire that didn't add up. This wasn't a simple house fire tragedy. This was something far darker, and the community sensed that almost immediately. Within hours, this quiet street was full of patrol cars, crime scene tape, and Michigan State Police arson investigators trying to piece together what had actually happened inside those walls. By Monday, 3 days after the bodies were found, autopsies had been completed at Corwell Health, Blodgett, and the sheriff's office held a press conference. Captain Jacob Sparks stood in front of cameras and confirmed what many had already started to suspect. All 8 family members died from gunshot wounds. Christopher Karolkiewicz, the husband, the father, had been ruled a suicide. His wife and all 6 children were ruled homicides. He'd used a registered handgun, and according to the evidence collected at the scene, no one else had fired that weapon except him, so there was no ambiguity about who pulled the trigger. The children's identities were withheld by investigators out of respect for family, though relatives would later confirm details themselves. The real question, the one this entire community and this family has been asking ever since, was why? And that word, why, is really the center of everything that's happened since. Now here's where things get complicated. Because in the days following that press conference, new information started surfacing, not from the sheriff's office, but from journalists digging into the family's own words. And what they found paints a very different picture than the smiling family photos everyone had been sharing online. Detroit news reporters located a Reddit account under the username MandyK1179, and after cross-referencing details like marriage dates, the kids' ages, occupations, and their location in Grand Haven, they confirmed it belonged to Mandy. Dozens of posts, most from around 2024, roughly 2 years before her death, and what she wrote there was raw, honest, and at times painful to read knowing how the story ends. She talked about how she and Chris had met years earlier when she was an intern, and he was older and already divorced. She talked about falling in love, having 5 kids together over the following decade, and then discovering that he was having what she believed was an affair with another young intern, the same age she'd been when they first met. That detail alone, history seeming to repeat itself inside her own marriage, was clearly something that shook her deeply. She wrote about a specific moment where she shoved him after learning about what she called an emotional affair. In her own words, she said she didn't feel bad about it, describing him as someone who towered over her and saying it felt like she was being assaulted and needed to fight back, calling it a fight or flight response. She also opened up about getting sober, writing that she stopped drinking when she started therapy, wanting to work through her problems clearly rather than numbing them. She talked about the difficult decision to cut off extended family to protect her own mental health. And she wrote candidly about how terrifying the idea of leaving felt, given that they had 6 kids together, saying plainly that the thought of starting over with that many children felt almost impossible. These weren't posts written by someone hiding a perfect marriage. They were posts written by someone who was clearly struggling, trying to hold something together for the sake of her children, years before any of this happened. And it raises a difficult question that a lot of people close to this case have been sitting with. If she was aware enough of the danger to write about it, to describe feeling physically overpowered, why didn't anyone around her realize how serious things actually were? None of this tells us definitively what triggered the actual killings. Investigators have been clear about that. They've said they're still going through documents recovered from the home, and as of the most recent update, they have not found any note that explains a motive. What they have is a timeline, a recently lost job that stripped away a major piece of Chris's identity and routine, a marriage with a documented history of infidelity and conflict, and then an unthinkable act of violence that ended 7 lives and erased a family that no longer exists. Emily Stoy Jones, Mandy's cousin, spoke on behalf of the family afterward, and what she said captures the confusion everyone's feeling. She said everybody wants to know why, that it's unfathomable, and that they need to know why. She said they still want answers, that they want someone to make it make sense, because right now it doesn't. She also pointed out something worth sitting with, that this hasn't just been painful for the family privately. Strangers online have picked apart every detail of Mandy's old posts, every photo, every caption, turning a private tragedy into public speculation, which she said has made an already unbearable loss feel even more exposed. And that's really where this case sits right now. The sheriff's office has said this plainly. This is an unspeakable tragedy that they may never completely understand. Investigators are still combing through what was recovered from that home. The origin point of the fire is still being finalized by Michigan State Police arson investigators, even though the broader determination that it was intentionally set after the killings has already been made. There's no trial coming, no defendant to prosecute, because the only person who could answer for what happened is also gone. So this isn't a case that ends in a courtroom. It ends, in a sense, exactly where it started, with a grieving family and a community searching for meaning in something that may never fully make sense. What we're left with is a family that looked, from the outside, like they were making it work. A mother who'd just taken her daughters on the trip of a lifetime, who wrote children's books about self-worth while quietly carrying her own pain. A father who'd lost his job and was clearly carrying something no one around him fully understood. Something that never surfaced publicly until it was far too late. 6 kids who had nothing to do with any of it, whose only involvement was being born into this family and trusting the 2 people who were supposed to protect them more than anyone else in the world. There are a few questions this case leaves behind that go beyond just this one family. How many people around us are quietly falling apart while looking completely fine from the outside, showing up to school pickups and posting vacation photos while privately unraveling? When someone loses their job or their sense of identity or control over their life, what actually pushes some people toward destruction instead of toward help? And why is it that warning signs, the kind Mandy herself put into words years before her death, describing feeling physically overpowered by her own husband, are so often only visible once it's already too late to act on them? I don't think there are easy answers to any of that. I'm not sure anyone will ever fully understand what happened inside the house on Riverside Trail, not even the investigators working the case right now, not even the family members who love Mandy and those 6 kids more than anything. But this family deserves to be remembered as more than just a headline, and their story deserves to be told honestly, without turning their pain into something cheap or sensational. If this case affected you the way it affected me putting it together, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and drop a comment with your thoughts below. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories the right way, with care and with respect for the people at the center of them. This has been Crime Files. Take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.